So what the talk was really today about is really accessing untapped talent, and which really what I mean by that is talent that's normally not in our kind of view or our traditional view of recruiting. And I wanted to probably really kind of cover that. It looks like it's bounced off your email address, maybe because it's too big. Monica, it's bounced off.
Possibly. I'm very sorry. I'm trying to get Jackie behind the scenes to do things, but I don't think she's going to be able to. I fear.
Yes, okay. It's a pity that we couldn't share.
I know. I'm really sorry.
That's okay. Yeah. So maybe I'll cover some slides. Maybe we'll send these, if you can send the slides out to people, and hopefully.
That would be superb. I think that's a wonderful idea, Michael.
Maybe PDF them and send them out. I'll just try and PDF it while I'm doing it now, so I can send you a PDF copy.
Perfect.
But yeah, this topic's really talking about kind of untapped talent that maybe not is in our and that's why the topic untapped is really talent that's not in our current view or in our current pipeline, or that we typically recruit against. And I think why we're kind of talking about this topic is why this topic is quite important is the shortages in the actual workforce at the moment. There is it's some stuff there is a report from Deloitte Access Economics saying that by 2025, which is not very far, we will going to need another 156,000 workers in the digital area. And, a lot of that's going to be obviously cyber, data analytics, and cloud. So they're the big kind of groups of resource demands. Just see if I can send you this, Monica, at the moment. So hopefully we can bring this up. So yeah, so this is what I really wanted to have a kind of talk through, because this problem is, it's not going away. And there's a number of things that are driving this kind of this shortage. And some of it's obviously COVID's actually accelerated the drive to a digital enterprise. So it's quite interesting. I was reading an article about what's been one of the biggest drivers to get to a digital enterprise. And it really has, COVID actually has driven a lot of organisations to move and accelerate their online presence or their digital presence. Or even also kind of reviewing their back-end operations to actually work out how they can actually make them digital. There's a compounding issue there's all of this is compounding. So we've got shortages in STEM graduates. We've got the lack of immigration and migration occurring. We've got also a growth of IT within the business. So what I mean by that is, again, back-end operations, or just us using more IT than we ever had before, like in accounting, procurement, client management, sales areas, and even just core businesses. So we can use kind of from using smartphones to using, even using sensors to go ahead and gather information. And then there's obviously a massive drive, which has probably been over the last kind of 10 years in the growth of consumer IT, which is like smartphones, gaming, and a lot of those things we now consume as entertainment for ourselves. If you think about now, we use platforms like Netflix, Stan, the Disney Channel. There's a whole bunch of other consumer-based IT that kind of sits around us consuming entertainment. Monica, did anything come through at all?
Just this very second. So give me a chance and I'll start to set that up. That's just a second. So keep talking and I'll try and get it sorted.
Okay. So what I'm going to be talking a little, one of the things I wanted to a little bit discuss, and this is kind of takes the kind of the theme of it, is typically we look at human capital as people fitting into boxes called jobs that deliver tasks. And one of those things, we look at this box called a job description, and a job description will have a technical skills, people skills, education, hours that must be worked, and maybe the location. That role is actually anchored to, or that job is anchored. One of the things that's kind of what with COVID has done is actually busted that assumption about location, which is fantastic. But we're still on this traditional kind of looking at recruitment, being that we need to have people with these kind of technical skills, these kind of people skills, this education, and that will then just deliver a set of tasks. I think the real question we've got to ask ourselves is really what tasks need to be delivered, and then really looking at what do people bring to this kind of these sorts of tasks. So start to look a bit more outside the box than particularly our traditional recruitment. Even so, you know, I don't particularly like to feel like I'm fitting in a box, and most people wouldn't fit in a box. So they all have, you know, for example, you might find somebody who's more mature and aged worker. They might only want to work part-time. So they're very much focused on, you know, part-time work. So that's designing a job that really fits into with what they're doing. People that are culturally and linguistically diverse might have people skill issues. So we have to really adjust. I mean, is that really important to have people skill issues if we actually are really after a higher data analytic jobs, or somebody looking at hunt activities within cybersecurity? So we've got to really start thinking about what really do we need to do the tasks? And we, you know, and started to kind of break down this idea that a job description, everyone must fit into this job description. Okay, so how do we actually find talent? You know, we kind of untapped talent. Firstly, we need to engage the full population of Australia to find talent, and that's critical. You know, we need to start looking at communities that we typically wouldn't be engaging with, and there's a number of those communities based on, you know, it could be, for example, veterans. Have you engaged the veteran population, people leaving the Defence Forces and, you know, moving? You know, could be an opportunity. This could be people that are with disabilities, and I would call them, you know, the people with abilities, not really just people with disabilities. So we have to look. We could be looking at people that you know, it might be youth, you know, so we're looking at people that are in that kind of just high school leavers. Instead of actually looking at leaving kind of a polytechnic or a technical college or a university, to re-engage them at a younger base. Or another opportunity is mining the existing employee base for talent. So there's numbers of organisations are doing this across the globe, and I wanted to give you kind of a bit of perspective of, you know, what some of those kind of opportunities, some of those organisations are. And this is about broadening out the perspective of where a talent pipeline is. And obviously you can't see these slides, but you know, what I had here was you've got GCHQ, which is you know, the communications headquarters in the UK, which runs a lot of the intelligence. They're looking for people that are neurodiverse, or in this time, very much their focus is on people that are dyslexic. They've been very big in recruiting. The Israelis have been recruiting with teens and also young adults with autism, similar to NAB and ANZ Bank locally. JP Morgan Chase have been very big, probably the #1 employer across America, looking at veterans. So they've been a very big recruiting of veterans, but they also have, which I've found very interesting, a number of reservists working in their SOCs, you know, and providing work experience to reservists in some of their security areas. So they've kind of created a program very much focused on veterans. In Toronto, there has been a very much big push by the municipal council there to look at young workers into cyber. So they've been very much focused on youth. And quite an innovative one was actually from Hewlett Packard Enterprises, who actually developed a cyber program for the Girl Scouts. And for the Girl Scouts, they actually get some patches, and as they progress through. So they've been very much big on actually building that pathway through. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of, you know, of kind of ideas about, you know, what people are doing differently to look at talent. So what's the kind of some of the benefits of diversity? And I think this really gets down to, you know, it's addressing, immediately one is that it helps to address skill gaps. We can actually, by going out a broader net, it allows us to go ahead and address skill gaps. We start getting diversity of thought. which is critical, which is, we start bringing new ideas, and people with different backgrounds and different ways of thinking bring a diversity that allows us to look at things very differently. It brings innovation, which is one of the other key things, by thinking outside the box or having somebody with a different perspective brings innovation. It also allows the organisation to have a relationship with the community. So organisations start to represent the community, which is great. And then there's also productivity, obviously, by having innovation, having people challenging some of the norms. You can actually then look at improving productivity through, these changes and redesigns of processes. How are we going, Monica? Any?
What I think the problem for me is because I'd have to restart it in order for that to happen. I've told Jackie to send this to all the participants so they've got it. Okay. But I'm not sure whether she's done that, but I have done that for you. So hopefully people will get that and be able to follow it as they go along.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, do apologise for this. So I know I'm kind of probably speaking at you a little bit. So having a look at, once you've kind of looked at the benefits of bringing diversity is really the question is, how do you start building a program that allows you to kind of access untapped talent? And, my advice is what ones I've built, and I've built a, just to give you a bit of background, I've built a neurodiversity program, I've built an Indigenous program, and now currently building a veterans program. It really is that you need to really focus on the cohort you want to actually attract. So, and the key part of actually with that cohort of population is trying to really understand it, understand what the barriers are to employment or perceived barriers. And it could be as simple as a job description. So I know from people that the program I've been running for the last 7 years with autistic individuals, job descriptions have been a big barrier. And they look at a job description, they go through it, and if they see anything they might not be able to do, they'll completely opt out. So where people that what they call us as being neurotypicals would kind of say, well, I can do about 80% of the job description. Well, I'll apply. So they're the completely opposite. If they can't do 100%, they won't actually apply. So this is one of the challenges within barriers to employment. Again, with looking at women in cyber and women in kind of tech areas, one of the big strong areas is actually giving more information about a day in the life of the role rather than the job description. So females are more interested in what the day of the life is, which is fantastic. And this helps out with really kind of providing an emotional connection to the workplace, and what does the culture look like, and what does really do I do during the day, and how does that really, and does that kind of integrate with my kind of the way I want to work, or how I want to actually integrate my maybe life after work as well. So I see we've got the slides up now, which is nice. I'm on probably on slide 8. So I think how to build a program. Yeah, that's it. So the questions are some of the things you need to think. What strengths do they bring? And strengths maybe not just in technical. Could be they're going to be they have loyalty. So therefore they're going to be there for for a long period of time. Or they it could be as simple as that they might want to do shift work or part-time work, so they can actually provide a surge capability to the organisation or that function. So it's actually working through what strengths they might bring into that area that are different from we have today. So we have a number of we've built, for example, shift work, and shift work for people. Sometimes for some people on the autism spectrum is really good because they actually are sometimes a little bit nocturnal. So we've been able to build a shift work capability around that. So it's actually thinking through that, or it could be that for example that you're using people that are in the the age community, which are or have recently retired. They might only really want to do 2 days a week, and that gives you the ability to maybe do a little bit of overflow work, particularly at certain times of the year. So it's actually getting quite flexible. You have to be flexible in your approach to the human capital to design, and not thinking of just, I've got to have 20 FTEs. 20 FTEs could be actually broken up over maybe 30 people. So it's actually being quite flexible in your design of these roles that suit the population. And what I mean by that also is by having flexibility in regards to obviously we now have a lot more flexibility in location, but also having flexibility in hours. Could be amount of leave you're actually providing. But when do they need to work from home? Do they have to work from a secured facility? How can you design the role to actually suit the population? The other one is really creating a safe environment for them to express themselves and learn. So obviously they're going to be coming into an environment which is hasn't really had hadn't this type of cohort of population before. So you need to actually create environments where they can learn and express themselves, and also that they're not judged. So they can actually start to actually bring their selves to work, as they say. And also that the people around them also are learning as well about that. Especially particularly with people with disability, sometimes there are some kind of some stereotypes or assumptions that people make. Establish appropriate support structures, which are kind of critical. So this is going to allow you to kind of ensure that the co-workers, the managers are supported, but also the individuals in the workplace. So we'll go to the next slide. This is just a little bit about the success factors. It's just my experience of what makes the success of building a program. A good executive sponsor, as I mentioned before, understanding your population and cohort you're building for, building a program with them. So I think that's critical. So you can understand how you're actually from the traction to actually sustainment, you can really help them with. And then really kind of be willing to redesign processes and really design jobs and tasks to actually do it. And one thing I've left here is reviewing performance management practices, which I think are sometimes archaic in some places. But it's actually going ahead and reviewing them to actually see if that really is there a better way to actually put some kind of bit more scaffolding around it to really suit the population as well. So example, we've worked with a couple of organisations to build a new performance management tool that's very specific for people on the spectrum, which has been fantastic. So we've actually been, we actually threw out our performance management practice because it really had you had the assumption you had to advocate for yourself, which is most behavioural systems are like that. You have to advocate for yourself, but unfortunately with a lot of people with disabilities, they have poor advocacy skills initially. Okay, next slide. So if we go to the next slide, yeah. So this is just an example of an attraction. This is called, doing something a bit differently. This is called Genius Armory, which is what they call a mass online open online course. So what this is supposed to do, it gives 6 modules. It can be done in 6 hours, and it gives people a sense of what, very easily very sense of what is cybersecurity. This was done with AusCyber, and this is very much focused on helping people understand what is cybersecurity. It's really focusing on finding candidates which are in that I don't know area about cyber. So we're kind of looking at that kind of raw talent, getting them interested, and then creating pathways to kind of higher education, or bringing them into kind of executive or some kind of other education courses. That's just a little example. Think about something differently. Probably next slide. This is a non-traditional process. I'm giving an example of what's been used in kind of a autism at work program. So looking at example, one is a motivational questionnaire to help really people people motivated for this type of work or industry. That really helps kind of really start to screen out very early that their motivation maybe for applying the job could be their parents' motivation or their carers' motivation, or they don't quite understand enough about the actual roles available. So we're trying to go through kind of a motivational questionnaire. some pre-screening, pre-assessment to really understand where they're at in their working ability, going through some, looking at executive functioning, what skills do they have in kind of communication, and also organisation. So where they're at on those things, and also helping. We've also in this process is about kind of helping them with their autism as well. Meaning what I mean by that is they get to understand a little bit about what they are, what is autism, and how does it kind of reflect in the workplace. So helping to educate them. This process has been designed to actually really help move people forward, even if people are not successful in the process. So there's an ethos about the program that every part of the program is supposed to help somebody forward, even if they are unsuccessful. So you can see here, there's some technical exercises around social engineering, code breaking, digital investigation, and computer science that eventually kind of really allows us to kind of start streaming people into certain roles. Next one, slide. This is just a bit of an example of a curriculum that was being built for a program, really to help people, particularly again on the autism spectrum, really about helping them, really get the appropriate skills to have just not only just a job, but have a career. So this is a little bit of a snapshot about what a program is, and the way DXC's built it. But that's kind of you can reach out to me later if you wanted more details with that. But I wanted to give you some kind of idea that just thinking outside the boxes, I think, is critical as well. And what things do you need to kind of build into your kind of work practices to help sustain the talent? And for example, you can see here, some of the things in this kind of program is job awareness, helping with self-determination, helping with self-advocacy. And transition is quite interesting, is helping people move between different job roles and helping people teach that. And there's a number of actually underneath there that this is really becomes an individual development plan, and people are allocated the appropriate curriculum to go through. And that might be as an individual or might be done as a group session. Got a next slide. This is an employee support tool. This has actually been, give you another example of a tool that's used to help sustain talent. This is actually used at Stanford University and a number of other organisations across the globe. It's called Life Sherpa, and it's really a tool that's been built to help people, really kind of adjust, help them when they're actually in the workplace. So they help them, kind of go ahead and, particularly finding a bit of a coaching. It's almost an online coaching app, but it also has a number of self kind of paced learning activities in there. So that's kind of giving people the ability to kind of feel like when I'm at work, so what's an interview? How do I actually practice my interview? Preparing for a phone, online interview. So it's kind of, there's a lot of material here just to help kind of existing employees adjust with, with the workplace. And this just gives you another example of what's potentially available, what other organisations are doing. This one actually is quite interestingly being used by a number of large kind of tech firms, by really helping the kind of untapped talent come in and then supporting it. Probably next slide I'll show, and this is probably understated a lot, is kind of sustainment. Sustainment is really critical for long-term success, as we all know. But it's really the hardest part. It's really integrating the program into the organisation, making sure the program doesn't become an island. So it starts to integrate with kind of maybe a graduate recruitment program. It could be, starts to integrate with traditional hiring processes. And so you've got to start kind of embedding it into the organisation, learning from successes and challenges, adjusting and redesigning processes. And probably the other thing is really obtaining feedback from the participants. So it's really about going through these iterations to make sure that you're not just seeing accessing this untapped talent really just for a once-off. You are doing this over and over to actually really get the best out of getting into this community. So hopefully I've left enough time for questions. I've just kind of motored through a little bit of it.
I absolutely love that talk, Michael. You did so incredibly well with all this technology problems and everything else. And I humbly apologize for things not working out on this today. And I'm so pleased I managed to get those slides working eventually. I have a lot of questions for you, Michael, obviously, because I just find your work so fascinating and so important. And I'm not seeing any questions come up yet on the Q&A. So if you don't mind, I'd love to ask you a couple of questions. My first question is this actually, and this is because I guess I come from a psychology background. When you're looking at people on the spectrum, obviously they're on a spectrum, right? So that means that they've got a different cluster of problems for each individual, and some are more severe than others. How do you deal with that in your particular program?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, as we know, the spectrum is a spectrum, and I think for us, we're kind of targeting within a particular group within that spectrum. For a lot of for people with autism, there's half the population that obviously have got intellectual disabilities, and there's other ones that have got don't have intellectual above average intelligence. So we're really focused on kind of the one part of that spectrum, and I think that's part of what our program focuses on. And if you have you can actually focus other programs on different kind of cohorts, but this one we've actually designed our program to focus on a particular set of skills we actually want to acquire for the workplace.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I think Nigel's next question really follows a nice segue from that. He asks, is there an agreed common way of measuring these programs?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Each kind of program we've kind of got has we've done our program has got a longitudinal research study, so which is available in academic literature. So that's our program. There's a lot of programs that don't have any academic research. From a corporation perspective, how we kind of measured the program for an internal success factors is really, we looked at the cost of it. We compared our program to traditional kind of recruitment costs. So that's from a cost perspective. We also looked at things like retention. So is it the same kind of retention we're getting from other programs, such as graduate recruitment programs? We also looked at things such as long-term kind of for the individuals, quality of life factors as well. So what was one thing we kind of were big on about quality of life. So we measured individuals' quality of life as they kind of came out, when they become into the program, and then obviously when they've actually gone into the general workplace as well. So I think it's really measuring some of the, from a corporate perspective, what are you really looking for? And for us, it was, ensuring that costs were aligned with traditional recruitment costs. If they weren't, we can then show a better outcome why that was. And for example, our cost of recruitment was just a little bit higher than our graduate recruitment program, but we've got better, longer retention rates than our recruitment program. So therefore we had less churn, and less churn, that means less rehiring. So therefore we've got actually a better cost outcome or per person than our traditional graduate recruitment program.
Thank you. We have a wonderful question from Rhiannon, who's one of our PhD students in cyber, and she asks you, Michael, she'd like to ask what an employee, not a team leader in a cybersecurity team, can do to help encourage the training of neurodiverse recruits.
Yeah, I think that's a good part. What we normally do is provide. We've got two mechanisms. We do a lot of kind of autism awareness training and neurodiverse training. So that's that can be done via a tool which is called Optimize. So there's a tool we've kind of with DXC, Microsoft, Google, and JP Morgan Chase came together to build. So that's a tool that can actually be delivered via online learning. And then there's material we've put forward which is open sourced by Cornell University, which you can go ahead and download that. And there's got a bunch of material there which people can use to kind of deliver kind of face-to-face or training.
Thank you. And I guess as a follow-on from that, Michael, I'm wondering, are there challenges for people who aren't neurodiverse in terms of working with teams of people with autism and other diversity issues? Because while the tool, that sounds wonderful, you know, the training tool, I'm wondering on an everyday basis, people interact in a certain way and they're used to looking at certain cues like facial cues and other things to get knowledge from others and see how they're fitting in and working within an environment. And it's a very different way to understand individuals, especially if you've got no psychology training. And even with that, right? How do you deal with that in your particular program?
I think it takes time. I think that's for everyone to readjust to understanding, and it's even like with me having 3 kids, I've had to learn how to be a different parent every time they've gone through different brackets. I mean, my kids now young adults. My parenting style is very different now when they were a teenager or when they were kids. So it's actually us all learning about how to actually readjust, and I think taking some of the assumptions that we might see, particularly say with autism, that we might see a kid behaving out in a shopping mall. And seeing that kind of really people having a bit of a tantrum, that autism is very different in adults. So I think that's the part of it is it's part of the learning process and supporting the existing co-worker. What we do is provide a autism support consultant, which is available for a period of about 12 to 2 years, for depending how many people we've got. But that person is also available for the co-workers and managers. So that's the important part. So it's really helping them readjust and readjust behaviours as well that they might have not even thought about. And it could be as simple as, we've had experiences where, you might have a meeting and on the meeting agenda at the end it says other business. And somebody who's autistic might say, well, shouldn't you be putting something in other business before we go turn up? But it's actually then part of it was actually explaining what other business means on the agenda item. So you go through the other business we might have an event that's occurred, for example, it might be an accident, and we have to brief people about the accident. And the accident only had 2 hours ago, so that gives us an ability to open. So it's explaining those kind of things and explaining that kind of simple kind of misperception of what other business might be.
That's a really good example, and it shows the challenges that we have ahead of us. But what your talk and your program demonstrates is the value in taking on that journey, right? I'm just wondering, where do you think the work needs to go from here in terms of your program and in terms of the research?
Yeah, I think it's a bit more research about actually attraction of untapped talent, and this is called quite broadly. I mean, it's like people are culturally diverse, which I think there's about almost 10 to 15% of the population is that now. So there is a big population gap or population probably we're not accessing. There's also us kind of looking at how do we improve better. Well, I think a population which we probably haven't done enough with is the aged, people leaving the workforce. I think that's a critical part where you've got people who are technically skilled, and some of the people that are leaving actually have probably got more technical skills than the people coming through as they were brought up and they know the technology from the ground up. For example, one of the things that, it's always commonly asked, do you know enough about TCP/IP? In my generation, we all learnt that pretty from the ground up. But, that's kind of that population's now leaving the workplace, and how do you actually engage that part of the workplace? So I think that's important. We've seen obviously a lot more focus on women in cyber, which I think is fantastic. But there's also other populations like the youth. How do we get offenders, people that are, want to see, they might be socially, economically disadvantaged. How do they come in and actually look at, as cyber being a career? And I think we've got to get better at some of these other populations about attracting them into a into the workforce, because we need them at the end of the day, because we're not just we've got to think differently about how we actually use the full population. And it's really interesting that, you know, only really we do this well, unfortunately, at the time of war, you know, that potentially we access the full part of our population. And that was well known, obviously, in the Second World War through the breaking the Enigma machine. So, which is, you know, everyone, that, and what people don't know about that story a bit was a lot of the code breaking was done by females, young females, because they were actually at home and they actually found them through crossword puzzles.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, a novel way to find them and empower them to feel that they could do this work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's a wonderful example.
So it was very much a young females that were they were the bracket that would obviously of people that are aged or middle aged, where they were off into the helping out, the hospitals. But there was a great part of the population who actually focused on code breaking.
Michael, that was a fantastic talk. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for bearing with us with all our technology problems.
No, that's not a problem. But please send out the slide deck to everyone, and
yes.
I'm very happy to kind of help out with any kind of questions and stuff like that.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Michael, we're going to end the presentation here, but if you don't mind, I might send you a Team Meets link and we can have another little chat from here, if you like, you and I.
Yeah, I can do that. What time do you want to do that? You want to do this after that, or? Yeah,
I'll send it to you now.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone that attended.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll do better the next time with our technology. But thank you for bearing with us, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.